Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you all joining us today, talking about Phius certification, the energy codes and resilience. I'm Ryan Siegel, as part of the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center, or CDAC. And it's a pleasure today, joined by a guest speaker, Isaac Elnicave from Phius here in Illinois. And just a brief background about CDAC. We are housed at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and we look to empower organizations with practical solutions for climate, energy, and sustainability. And we do that through a number of different programs dealing with energy efficiency, saving money, and helping businesses and organizations become more sustainable through assessments, through training opportunities, and the like. So today's energy code training is provided by the Illinois State Energy Office, housed at the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. So we do appreciate their support of the Energy Code Technical Assistance Program, of which this training is a part of. And today's session, it is approved for continuing education credits. We are a preferred education provider with ICC as well as AIA. So for those of you during your registration who provided your AIA member number or indicated that you are a member of ICC, we will go ahead and report those to you. But all participants today will receive a certificate of participation following today's training. Today's session is also being recorded. The archive will be housed at our website. So for those of you who may have colleagues that were not able to join today, you can go ahead and pass this information along to them, and they can go ahead and see the archive recording of this, along with all of our past workshops and webinars that we archive to our website. So for those of you who may be new to our program, there is a wealth of information on our website. So the Energy Code training and program consists of many parts and pieces. Part of this is technical support. So we provide technical support for any projects here in the state of Illinois. So that could be for code officials, design professionals, contractors, or building owners or occupants. As far as if you are needing technical support regarding the Illinois Energy Conservation Code, how does it apply? Does it apply in this situation? I'm faced with this existing condition. How do I make my planned project comply? Feel free to reach out to us, energycode@illinois.edu. We do have an 800 number. So if you do have just a quick question, where is this located in the code or something like that, feel free to reach out to us at our 800 number, 800-214-7954. But we do encourage people to go ahead and email us. That allows us the opportunity to provide a written response back to you so that may be shared easily across your project team, including with the code official or the designers as well. So that can be very beneficial for helping keep everyone on the same page with that. So I mentioned our online resources at our online webpage, smartenergy.illinois.edu/energy-code. That does include our previous workshops and webinars, as well as our upcoming workshop and webinar yet scheduled for this fiscal year, as well as several online on-demand training modules. So for those of you who may be needing continuing education credits for whatever certifications, those on-demand training modules may be beneficial to you. As workshops and webinars, those CEUs are only eligible for the live version. As far as our upcoming trainings, so this also shows you the trainings we've had earlier this program year. Today covering Passive House Energy Codes and Resilience. We do have 2 remaining trainings coming up yet this year. First on May 14th, this is an in-person down in Collinsville, covering Code Basics Performance Path, as well as the upcoming 2024 IECC. The May 20th, that's going to be a 1-hour online webinar covering the 2024 IECC. This is going to be an overview, whereas the in-person, we estimate that'll be approximately 3 hours on 2024 IECC, as well as 3 hours on the Code Basics and Performance Path. So it's a 6-hour training overall on May 14th and 1 hour on May 20th. Want to make sure that people are aware that the International Code Council makes the codes available on their website, free for viewing at no cost to people. This is also very helpful, especially for the energy code, as their codes are quite searchable. The Control F or find feature on works very well and will search for keywords across the entire chapter that you're looking in, and is very responsive for that. Fortunately for the energy code, because most of the material is found in chapter 4, it's quite handy for that. But it is the Illinois Energy Conservation Code is available on the ICC website, as well as the Chicago Energy Transformation Code. Both of these are based on the 2021 IECC, or International Energy Conservation Code. The 2024 International Energy Conservation Code was published in May of last year. We are anticipating adoption by the state coming in May, so just next month, and the enforcement date is anticipated to be set for the end of November of 2025. So for permit applications dated December 1, 2025 or later, we anticipate you should be planning to use the 2024 IECC along with the Illinois amendments. So as noted, we do have a webinar coming up next month on the 2024 IECC, and we do anticipate covering the Illinois amendments that have been proposed for that. Now that that has made it through the Illinois Energy Code Advisory Committee's vote. So that will be going to the Capital Development Board meeting for May is when it's scheduled for. If you do have questions during today's session, we do encourage you, please go ahead and use the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Also, for those of you who may be viewing this, such as in a conference room with a group, go ahead and use that Q&A function and enter as part of a question your names and email addresses for those that you are viewing it with today, so we can go ahead and apply the credits appropriately for those as well. By putting it as a mock question, so to speak, that'll allow us to capture that. We again do encourage people, if you do have questions, use that Q&A function, as if you put it in the chat, we may miss it, but with the Q&A, it will make sure to be captured until we go ahead and acknowledge that. So going to talk a little bit today as far as, again, today's focus is on the Passive House Compliance Path, or more specifically, the Phius compliance path presently for residential buildings in the state of Illinois. With the 2024 amendments, we anticipate that is going to broaden to cover both residential or be available to both residential and commercial buildings, as well as expand to include PHI as well as Phius. So you have multiple options as far as how you wish to demonstrate that compliance coming soon. But at this point, this is just for residential buildings in Illinois for the Phius compliance path. We're going to walk through some of the certification process and understand those features that tie to resiliency of buildings and how that leads to a safe environment and may allow buildings to recover quicker from utility disruptions and perhaps maintain their safety for a longer period. I'm going to touch briefly as far as resilience and recognizing that want to make sure that we're on the same page as far as what that is. So understanding the definition that we're going to use for resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. So when an event occurs that has some detrimental impact, the ability to either withstand that impact or that disruption, or to recover quickly from or to bounce back from having that uh, difficulty imposed upon you. So this can take a form of several different things, from such as temperature, heat and cold, wind, storm, and wildfires. We don't often think of wildfires here in the prairie state, but that is often that by protecting yourself from wind and storms, that can benefit from wildfire as well as other natural disasters. Commonly, one that we think of is utility outages. That is something that most everyone has experienced from time to time. Fortunately, we live in a state that has had a fairly robust utility system for the most part, uh, but understanding that Phius and Passive House can be very beneficial for utility outage and maintaining that safe environment, as well as utility price spikes. Phius, and something that Isaac will cover more in depth as far as that energy efficiency. And so if you use less energy, an increase in utility prices, while they won't be something people will be happy about, that will impact you less if you're using less energy. So as far as heat and cold, with more insulation and higher fenestration performance, as well as some vestibules that the code often requires to be installed for larger, at least on the commercial building, using vestibules and demand controlled ventilation. So only bringing in as much outside air as is needed for the occupants and to maintain that healthy environment, and not bringing in excessive air that can minimize how much heat loss or heat gain that building experiences. With wind and storm, often is the increased air tightness. You'll often experience on very windy days. Spaces feel colder, especially in the winter, or in the summer, you might feel more humidity from a lack of air tightness. And so by improving that air tightness, that also with air, that was something that California and others that have experienced wildfires this year, they noted that oftentimes by buildings allowing air into them, often that carried with it embers from distant fires that then led to structure fires as well. So having that better air tightness can improve and uh, and reduce the uh, potential susceptibility from things such as wildfires, or even your neighbor's home that catches on fire, those embers and heat that can travel to your home. So with utility outages, we've all experienced this, where the power will go out often in a storm, and commonly in the evening when it's the most convenient and easiest to see for crews to repair. But maintaining livability and maintaining that comfort even when the power goes out, so that we don't end up with freezing homes, or in the summer potential heat and humidity uh, events and increased mortality from that can be substantial. Mentioned earlier, as far as the utility price spikes, using less energy obviously lowers your utility costs overall, but also as utility costs increase, the impact to you, the building owner, can be reduced by using buildings that use less energy overall. Additionally, Phius does require high efficiency equipment as part of performance, because if you are building a high performing building, generally you're going to end up with equipment, and you'll lean towards decisions that are higher performance and more efficient with that. And also with energy recovery ventilation, as we do bring air in from outside to maintain or seek to maintain that healthy environment, making sure that we are performing that energy recovery to minimize how much energy that how much energy impact that outdoor air has. And understanding here as far as energy efficiency of heating systems, we do see that uh, while we do have high efficiency gas equipment that can reach 92%. There is now starting to be research as far as gas heat pumps that might be in the 120, 140% efficient range. Heat pumps can often be 300 to 400%, and especially as you get into cold climate heat pump systems that are able to continue to provide heat in a relatively efficient manner, even down to below 0 degrees, and continue to operate heat as opposed to the previous heat pump technologies that really took a big hit once you got around freezing. So again, touching on the resilience, from temperature, all the wind, uh, utility outages, and price spikes. So this is kind of where, a lot of these features that Isaac's going to end up touching on in some of that process, is leading to, and in keeping in mind, how does this impact the resilience of a home? Fortunately for projects that are going under the Phius project system, for the code compliance checks and the submittals for that, let's touch on that. And this is going to be very fairly simple uh, for the code officials and the inspectors. There's because part of going under Phius, or in the future Phius or PHI certification, part of that is having this independent third party that is involved in the project to assist with some of these compliance checks. So the submittals for code compliance is fairly simple. So first of which is your pre-award letter. And with that, basically calling out that this project is registered for Phius, and some of the this would be during the pre-submittal, is this initial letter. Following your construction and certification, you then are issued your project certificate that you then turn in as far as showing that it's completed. Along with these, additionally, as part of the pre-inspection, is is to provide a features list of this. So this is required by the code as far as your pre-submittal letter, as well as a features list. So what this would be is, this is the project criteria. So as the Phius design has come forth, and they'll have estimated, here's the air tightness we're going off of, or some of these other features. This is not an exhaustive list, and this is not an inclusive list either. So this is not meant to say that your list shall include these things, but these are some of the common features that you might find in passive house projects. So, and these are the things that the project team may wish to have the city inspector perform and do some checks on. So, for example, the project, while Phius sets an absolute limit of 0.6 air changes per hour at 50 pascals, and that may come up with a certain CFM of air leakage rate, you know, then but your project team may say, we're going to set our target to be even better than that. And so for our project, we're going to say we want it to be no higher than, say, 125 CFM. And so as providing this features list, they're going to say the limit is 125 CFM at 50. And so that's what the inspector is going to look for. So rather than just checking for the blower door score and saying, well, is it at least, no more than 0.6? They're going to say, well, they said it should be no more than 150, and therefore I'm just going to check that it's no higher than 150. So this is kind of so as for municipalities that when you turn in a Phius checklist and they look at it and say, I don't know how to inspect one of these. This is a unique thing. This is the features list that they should be looking for. And this is kind of what they're inspecting to. It's not necessarily just I'm going to inspect to what the code book says. It's what is the project designed to. So with that, I do have a couple of questions before I turn it over to Isaac. So want to learn a little bit more from the audience as far as what your experiences are. So first question is, have you heard of Passive House? Yes or no? Second is, are you aware that Passive House can be used for both residential and commercial projects? Yes or no? This is just in general, not necessarily for code compliance. And question three, have you encountered a Passive House project? That is something that I would anticipate Isaac may talk a little bit more about, as far as you might have encountered Passive House projects that you might not have known, because Passive House projects don't have to look odd or highly unique. They can, but that's not a requirement for it. All right, let's see what people had. So that is fortunate, being that you are attending a webinar on Passive House, that yes, people generally have heard of Passive House. Okay, about an even mix as far as people who are aware that it can be residential or commercial, with a few more saying yes than no. And most people do not believe that they have encountered a Passive House project. So it's good to be aware, as far as and understand where people are starting from for their uh, uh, frame of reference. So uh, second poll here. So this is kind of our learning check. First question, does the code specify what must be included in this features list? Yes or no? And number two, what documentation is required for the Phius Energy Code certification? List of compliance features, solar panels, geothermal heating and cooling, pre-certification or design letter, and a project certificate. Give people just a minute or two. All right, looks like most everyone has had a chance to answer. Okay. So, all right. Most people got the first question correct, that no, the code does not specify what must be in this features list, only that you must provide a features list. And for the second question, looks like most everyone got this one. does not appear to have been much confusion here. That yes, passive Phius certification does require the list of compliance features, pre-certification or design letter, and project certificate. So you have three things you have to provide for that. So, all right. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Isaac so we can learn a little bit more about Phius and projects.
Thank you, Ryan. Again, my name is Isaac Alnicave, and I work at Phius. I work both on the certification team, as well as I do the policy work in support of Phius. And I like to start with this particular slide because, as Ryan mentioned, we are while Phius is a design standard, it does not put any limits on what the design needs to look like. In fact, an important aspect of Phius that we like to emphasize is that it is a climate-specific standard. And so it functions just as well in a place like Maine as in a place like Arizona, like Illinois. Obviously the projects will look different because obviously they'll look at the architecture from a given area, but it functions for any of these. So sorry. It's not, oh, here we go. So this is how I always like to start my presentation. Which one of these is the Phius project? This is a set of 3 row houses in Philadelphia. One of them had been one had been upgraded to the Phius standard. And you can tell immediately from an IR camera which one is giving away all of their heat. And frankly, we always like to talk about this from a point of view of imagine that yellow and that red to be dollar bills that are escaping out into the outside from the inside of your house. But this is what you will end up with. And this in turn, what it functions as for the building residents is that you have an energy efficient home. It is less costly to use, but it is also comfortable and quiet, and both gives you an economic improvement in your lifestyle, but also gives you kind of non-economic improvements to make your life and your livability better. So what is the Phius standard? The Phius standard is a set of design principles for creating ultra energy efficient buildings. And I want to emphasize that the set of design principles is meant as a holistic set of design principles. In other words, if you think about the code often, you think about, well, we have to do roof insulation and wall insulation, and you have to put in efficient equipment. But with the Phius standard, it is designed as a holistic. It basically functions together so that you build a very, and I'll get into these, but a very tight envelope, very strong windows, good air sealing. And then what then tends to happen is when you combine that with high efficiency equipment, things like all of a sudden the size of the equipment becomes a lot less. So all of a sudden you save money, not just in the operational aspect of it, but also in during the construction of it. And so it's basically aimed at creating ultra efficient buildings that are comfortable, healthy. We have a number of co-requisite programs, such as the indoor air quality program that has to be met as well, and quiet indoor living spaces. And this can be applied to single-family homes, multifamily, schools, skyscrapers, in general. It does not just have to be single-family homes. In fact, at this point, roughly half the projects that Phius certifies are single-family homes, and about 40% are multifamily homes. I also want to emphasize the healthy and quiet part of this, because I think people, once once you live inside a home that has been built to the Phius standard, you notice that all of a sudden there is a sense of well-being that comes out of living here. We have been told that we built a number of Phius homes and Phius multifamily in cities, and people constantly, the thing that almost everybody talks about is the quiet. It provides a sanctuary for people. Many parents have told us that all of a sudden their children can do their homework without um, outside influences bothering them. So view this as both energy efficiency, as economic, as helping you afford energy costs, but also enhancing your livability. So what are the principles that are behind a Phius design? These are the 5 that we always like to focus on. Number 1, we focus on continuous insulation throughout the entire envelope. As many of you probably know that the standard way that code requires is to put in insulation inside the house, in between the studs, either fiberglass batts or cellulose. And that's certainly often part of a Phius design, but we also require continuous insulation on the outside. And this is done for various reasons, but a big part is to mitigate what's called thermal bridging. If you go back to this, the original photo, or the original picture that I showed, where you can see that the orange and yellow and the red is thermal bridging, is heat just flowing out. And by using continuous insulation, we manage to keep the heat in, or obviously during the summertime, it keeps the cool in, either direction. The second thing is that we have an extremely airtight building envelope. It's certainly significantly tighter than code, usually about 3 to 4 times tighter. And I know that people often tell us that that's in a sense a scary concept, but as I said, we have certified over 500 buildings at this point, and people have learned how to do it. And once you learn how to build an airtight home, then it's just the benefits just are enormous, both in terms of keeping the resilience, as Ryan mentioned. It keeps your house warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It prevents, if you will, bad air from coming in. As we have noted in California, it does prevent the inclusion of embers, also the inclusion of dust into your house. But it mostly functions as giving you a sense, an ability to control the indoor environment. In time with this, we require high performance windows and doors, both in terms of how efficient they are, but how well they are installed. And again, that ties back to the airtight building envelope, and it ties back to the continuous insulation. And then we have an old saying here in the building science community: build tight, ventilate right. And so we also incorporate balanced heat and moisture recovery ventilation. The ERVs, the energy recovery ventilators, or the heat recovery ventilators, those are always included as part of a Phius project, making sure that both you have an airtight building envelope, but we also want to make sure that the people who are living inside have access to clean, filtered air, both coming in and then the exhausting of stale air out. And then finally, as I mentioned, once you do all those things, all of a sudden you do still often need a space conditioning system, heating and cooling, but it is now efficient and much smaller, and it's used a lot. It's used a lot less. And by following these principles, we have found that it becomes very much easier to build to a very strong and very rigorous energy efficiency standard. So what does that entail? Uh, Buildings built to the Phius standard reduce energy use by around 33%, and that's energy use. Ryan actually wanted me to emphasize that in terms of heating and cooling your demand, the heating and cooling demand, not just the total energy, but the heating and cooling, that can actually drop by as much as 60 to 70%. Because again, we have very airtight built, a very airtight envelope, very airtight. It's continuously insulated. The windows are extremely efficient. So all of the heat, so your heating and your cooling loads become all of a sudden, less than half of what they were before. And then the other thing I want to emphasize is that to make sure that this happens, Phius takes every project that gets a Phius certification has to go through a two-part process, which I'm going to enumerate on the next couple of slides, to ensure that the building performs to the Phius standard. It's not just having a book or a guidebook or a set of design principles, it's putting them into practice. And we have a very, very rigorous design certification process that ensures that what what you are looking for, what you are asking for in a Phius project is what you get. Importantly, this becomes this ties back into code compliance, because at that point, code officials can be very certain that the house is going to perform the way it's meant to. And as Phius, we check pretty much everything that's related to the energy standard. So we have in our guidebook something called a new construction process matrix. So here's how it goes. The first phase, sometimes if you are if you're a developer or an architect and you want to know whether you want to do a Phius project, we have what's called a feasibility study, in which we will do a very, it's not a quick and dirty, but a fairly quick analysis of your design and see if it can meet, based on your geometry, based on the kinds of materials, based on location, whether it can meet the Phius standard. You ask for, if that makes sense, the project team asks for a contract. Once the contract is signed and payment, you're registered. That's your first milestone. Once you're registered, your project will show up on the Phius website, and it becomes part of our database. The second part, once it's registered, is called a design review. Think about this as the permits, as trying to get a permit, a building permit. The CPHC, who is a certified passive house consultant, who you will be working with, will provide both the WFI model, the software program, to make sure that it does meet our targets in the standard, but also make sure that all of the requirements are incorporated into the drawings and that you have the right specifications. Phius will review and feedback, will provide very detailed review and feedback of the model, of the drawings, of the specifications, making sure that it does meet our requirements. It's an iterative process. Usually it's 2 or 3 rounds, much like a plan check. And then once all comments are resolved, and the model is met, then you receive what is called the design, as Ryan said, you receive the design certification letter. This again functions essentially like, think of it as a building permit. Your design now works. Your design now meets the Phius requirement. As always, as I'm sure everybody knows, that's, the building permit is one thing. Building the building and getting it to work is the next stage. So now that you've got past milestone 1, which is the registration, milestone 2, which is design certification, we move on to the next phase, which is the construction. We train consultants. We also train builders, certified passive house builders, and we also have certified passive house verifiers and raters. The builders obviously build to the design, and then we have the verifiers or the raters for single family, verifiers for multifamily. Review and perform on-site visits. They do both on-site visits to document whether the insulation is being done correctly, whether the correct mechanical equipment is being put in, but also do some testing. Do the testing for ventilation. Make sure that airflows are coming to all the rooms that it's as designed, and to make sure that they do a blower door test to make sure that the air sealing requirement is met. Much like the first one, Phius reviews all the documentation, and once the documentation is complete and shows that all the aspects of the design have been incorporated into the construction, Phius will provide milestone 3, which is the final certification. This functions in many ways as the C of O, in that it is now saying we have reviewed the construction, the as-built, the project is as built, and it still meets the Phius requirements. And so at that point, you get your final certification letter, and that's what you can submit to certainly at the second stage to get your final, you get your C of O for your project. And that gives you a brief description of how the certification process works. I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up.
Uh, Thank you, Isaac. I think maybe you touched on a few of these, but just wanted to make sure we highlight them for the people in the audience. As far as, you had mentioned about the certified passive house consultants. So going through a Phius project, this is not something that just any designer can do and have a project like this. There needs to be someone who's been trained and certified for the tools that are used for the certification. Is that
Yeah. Yeah, we have trainings for 3 different types of professionals. Actually 4, but 3 are the main. The certified passive house consultant. The certified passive house consultant is the person who works on and develops the design for the Phius project. They are going to be familiar with our software, which is called Woofy Passive, and they know what levels of insulation need to be put in, what levels of efficiency for mechanical equipment needs to be put in. They know how to incorporate all the appliances, the lighting, and the like. And there is a training program for the what Ryan was saying, the certified passive house consultant. We also have a training program for builders, which we will receive who are basically become certified passive house builders. So they are taught how to build to Phius principles, making sure that we focus on things like how to achieve that airtight requirement, how to make sure that all the insulation, the levels of insulation are done correctly, how to make sure that continuous insulation is installed correctly, how to make sure that the windows are both air sealed and adequate in terms of energy efficiency, because a Phius window will often be a triple pane window. They're going to be thicker than normal. And so you need to be clear, and you need to have experience, and you need to have understanding of how to install them. And then the third professional that we incorporate are called certified passive house raters or certified passive house verifiers. Um, a certified passive house rater would be effectively a HERS rater who has taken additional training um, in passive house principles. So not only are they trained as a HERS rater and understand HERS ratings, but also take that and then take that to a higher level and really understand how to see how to inspect to make sure that the air sealing levels are done, that the real air sealing details are done correctly, that um, that the ventilation, that we have the balanced ventilation that we require. And so we have the certified passive house rater, who again focuses on single family homes. And then we have certified passive house verifier, who also then has to become familiar with the Energy Star multifamily new construction program and the like. Excuse me. Um, and to make sure that they know how to inspect and review projects as well as do blower door tests for multifamily to make sure that they meet the requirements um, for multifamily homes. And again, as mentioned before, this also translates into being able to do these same kind of principles for schools, um, for municipal buildings, for offices, and the like.
Okay. Yeah. And one other clarification, when you talked about, the air sealing on the windows and being important of that. Now that doesn't mean that that the windows are not operable. Is that correct? That often
Yeah,
they're still operable windows. They're
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. We
okay.
have both tilt-turn operable windows as well as fixed windows. They're not when I'm talking about well seal, I'm talking about well sealed around the perimeter of the windows and making sure that there's no airflow or water infiltration around the perimeter of the windows. But yes, you can absolutely have operable windows in a Phius project. In fact, I don't know any project that doesn't have operable windows.
Well, it's just that was a question that came in and wanted to make sure that because yeah, that is one that I could certainly see a misunderstanding or
Sure.
someone hears about airtight, 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 and people from experience know windows are a leaky thing, and so it's good to understand and recognize that the industry has come up with products that provide good air sealing when they are closed, that yet
Yeah.
still are able to open as well. So we'll perhaps touch on a few more as we go through, but kind of transitioning over now, thinking about this from those principles that Isaac had talked about, and really understanding for each of those principles, what does that do for resilience? I talked a lot about the continuous insulation, recognizing that this is a uh, big thing as far as if you're putting on you're cold in the winter, do you put the winter coat on over you, or do you try to stuff your winter coat in between your ribs? That we like a nice full winter coat, a nice continuous winter coat for it. So by minimizing that heat transfer, especially in the winter and summer, making sure that whatever happens, we have good control over the indoor conditions. We bring in how much outside air we want, when we want it, and how often we need it. So rather than just relying on the building to leak air, we're going to make it nice and tight, and then bring in the amount of air that we want. And so I talk about when people say, oh, buildings need to breathe. I note, well, I like to breathe every day, not just on windy days. So, having that continuous insulation blanket can be very beneficial for minimizing that heat gain or loss with that. Similarly, with the airtight envelope, and Isaac touched on something that I hadn't even necessarily connected with, was how quiet things are. Because that's one of the things we often think about as air moves, transferring heat and humidity, and Isaac touched on pollutants, but also sound. A lot of sound transfers through air. So if air is able to move through, sound also moves through that space too. So by getting that airtight, we are maximizing that control of that indoor space for us. So touched on that high performance fenestration, windows and doors. These are often the weakest spots of a building envelope. Windows and doors, even high performance windows out there, you know, insulation wise, you're talking at best maybe an R10, which would be a very bad wall. So making sure that we are not relying just on code minimum windows and doors, but going above and beyond that. So addressing that weakest spot and going after that can be very beneficial. Um, Also with that balanced heat and moisture recovery, also known as energy recovery, making sure that we are providing that important outside air, uh, but while minimizing the cost of that. Uh, so, balancing out moisture, recognizing that there is humidity outside in the summer, but there's also sources of moisture inside as well. And so making sure to uh, these designs working to manage that moisture, from showers and cooking and plants and other things that we might have inside that are providing moisture, that we manage and remove moisture as we're able to, and as it's beneficial while still keeping that in check. And then obviously minimizing that space conditioning, recognizing this is where trying to provide that resilience over time, recognizing that things are always the only constant is change. And so by having this, space conditioning, while it's going to be fairly small, it allows for that building to adjust over time. So as that the calculation was done based on a point in time. And so as conditions that may drift over time, having that little bit of conditioning allows that building to maintain that comfort over that long time period. So uh, we'll touch on a little bit other things, but I do want to make everyone aware there's a series coming, the Road to PhiusCon. This is a partnership between Phius and the Illinois Green Alliance, based in Chicago. So there's a series of events coming. Uh, so for those of you who this kind of whet your appetite and you want to dig in further, there's a lot of different opportunities here. I don't know, Isaac, do you want to touch on some of these
Sure.
opportunities?
Sure. Yeah, and so in on Thursday, we're going to get into we're going to have a with IGA, we're going to have with basically a Phius 101 where we're going to go into what I just talked about in 10 minutes, but go into much more detail, but really keep it very much at the basics of what Phius incorporates. You'll see a number of these are question and answer forums in early May and early July. These question and answer forums are basically office hours. If you are doing a project or you're just interested in some aspect of Phius, we will have one of our Phius certification staff people be part of host this office hours and you can answer any question. You can ask any question, and we can usually give you an answer either right then and there or very close. We're going to have a discussion on incentives in July, where I will go into more. I will personally go into more of the incentives behind Phius projects, such as the low-income housing tax credits, for example, and the Chicago sustainability policy. And then we will talk in September about case studies so you can actually see detailed details and kind of deep dives into particular projects. Um, in May, I'm kind of jumping, but in May, we're going to have what's called our non-residential summit, where we're going to have discussions on schools and municipal buildings. So if you're not just interested in doing homes or multifamily. And finally, October 6th through 8th, we will have Phius Con, where it's going to be all things Phius. This year, it's going to be held in Milwaukee. So it's just a train ride away, October 6th through 8th. And almost no question that you can imagine won't be answered at Phius Con with relationship to Phius. So feel free to email me with any questions or comments, and I will be happy to answer any about any of these future events.
Oh, all right. Uh, do appreciate we do have a couple more uh, couple of questions that have come in. Once again, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us, energycode@illinois.edu, or our 800 number. Let's check a couple of these questions here. One of these, SIP panel construction with 2x splines and structural point loads. Is that considered continuous insulation, or how might Phius address those locations? Does that end up with a little wrap of extra continuous around those spline locations, or how might that be
Yes.
done?
Yeah. I mean, typically SIP construction is used. We have seen it in a number of projects. So yes, you can just do little bits. Other things that we do if we want to get into a little bit of the weeds is we do take those into account as thermal bridges and want to make, and we will just kind of as part of the program, as part of the analysis, make sure we take those into account that they are going to give off a little bit more energy than normal, which means that you may want to do, you end up putting in a little bit. The SIP becomes a little bit. You use maybe a slightly thicker SIP wall, but yes, you can just do little bits. Um, you can also do a little bit of continuous insulation around the splines, but
Okay, so
it's been done many times.
uh, so a few different options. Good to be aware of that. So just confirming, recognizing, and part of this may be because passive house has kind of been in the name, but most everything you've talked about today, it applies regardless of residential, commercial,
Right.
municipal. It's all the same principles. But yeah, and I think that may be also why uh, PHI and Phius are sort of leaning more towards just using that as their name rather than Passive House Institute or Passive House Institute US, or
Right.
because understanding it is so much more than just houses, and we can all live
Yeah.
and work in wonderful buildings. So, uh, do recognize we are at time. I will stay on for a couple of minutes as well to answer other
Yeah, I'll
questions.
stay on.
But I do want to wrap up here and thank everyone for attending today's session on Phius. And so, if you have any other questions, and on behalf of myself and Isaac, appreciate everyone's time and have a wonderful afternoon. All right. Oh, here's an interesting question. An ADU above a garage, would that be a red flag or how
Yes.
might that? Okay, that's
Yes. An ADU above a garage would be a very difficult project to meet. You would have an enormous, that one would have, you would have a lot of trouble meeting the air sealing requirements.
so
On that.
it's not a no, but that would be a very tough project.
Yes, yes. That one would require a lot of that would require a lot of work. We would be focused, we would put a lot of extra focus on that because there are lots of places where there's air infiltration, and when we start having that kind of level of air infiltration, then we have to start worrying about moisture and things of those nature. So of that nature. So um the answer is it's not a no, but be prepared to get extra special attention on that one.
Yeah, that's good. Uh, Here's an interesting one. Is it possible, from a constructability standpoint of view, to provide continuous insulation without thermal bridging? I realize maybe some of this is fasteners. We have found while detailing our projects that building components need to be attached, bolted, drilled, affixed, supported, which makes continuous, quote unquote, not always feasible. Now, I from the code standpoint, I do know that the fastener, fasteners is not doesn't automatically disqualify continuous, but also from a practical standpoint, it's these are point things. I don't know. Do you have any?
Yes,
Uh,
actually, I have a very, very specific answer on this one. Um, I mean, and this applies in, but yes, we actually have as part of our analysis, we incorporate a number of where we call calculators. And we can calculate the level of thermal bridging that arises from the fasteners. So there will be, so let's say, for example, you have 4 inches of insulation at R5, and that counts as R20. We would derate the insulation, the R value of the insulation to take into account those fasteners. So it would not be a huge amount, but it wouldn't quite, we wouldn't give you the R20, we would give you somewhat less to take into account the heat loss through the fasteners. So we absolutely take this into account as you're doing this. So that was a really interesting question. But yeah, we even have a full calculation um,
and
on how to do that.
and I imagine you might, if this person was interested in learning more as far as how to minimize that thermal bridging or some of that
Yeah,
constructability questions, that's something that you and Phius would be happy to
absolutely.
assist with. Here's how to detail a high performance, and which I imagine that partly goes back to your uh, becoming a Phius contractor,
Right.
training as far as how do I make sure that I've not only selected the right fastener but installed it in such a way to maximize
Minimize,
performance.
right. Minimize thermal bridging.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So,
And I would say that that applies if you're doing multifamily and we're doing and you're putting in the exterior skin and how to connect the exterior skin back to the the main portion of the building, and how to handle thermal bridging in that score. I want to emphasize, we didn't have much time, but we take thermal bridging very seriously. We have lots and lots of analysis tools to help minimize it in all projects. understanding, as Ryan just said, that it's probably impossible to completely eliminate it, but we will minimize it as much as to the fullest extent.
So, all right. Well, thanks again, and
Thank you.
appreciate everyone for sticking around, and thank you again to Isaac, and appreciate your expertise on this topic, and hopefully uh, look forward to more projects.
Absolutely. Thank you.